Before we configure any of these notifications, I want to first configure some contacts and more or less just show you how you would identify the contacts, the people who are going to receive the notifications. Now, a notification has certain subscribers. Those subscribers are called contacts. And the contacts can have one or more of what we call delivery endpoints. Now, the typical delivery endpoint is simply an email address. And if I do a search for my existing contacts, let's go ahead and search for all the existing contacts. You'll notice that all of them do have delivery endpoints associated with them. Well, I shouldn't say all of them. Some of them do. Now, some of the ones that we're finding right here are contacts. Some of these contacts are contacts that we have not built specifically for notifications. Instead, we are tying the notification contact search into Active Directory. So you'll notice that the user, Bob Smith, who is an Active Directory user, he has an email. This email right here is one of his delivery endpoints. And you'll notice that I can add new delivery endpoints to this user. Now, what would a new delivery endpoint be? Well, it could be a second email address or something else that routes information, for Bob Smith. So the first point I want to make is that, typically if you're using Active Directory, you're going to want to make sure that Active Directory is something that notifications knows about so that you can go out and use Active Directory as a search mechanism. Now, we'll talk a little later on, but I can also create new contacts that are not in Active Directory. So we're just getting kind of we're getting extra boost here from Active Directory so that we don't have to create things that already exist in another capacity, these Active Directory users. Now, in order to make this work, this Active Directory connection work, you have to first go down into this navigation pane here, or as we call it, the navigator panel here. In this navigator panel, make sure you've selected Contacts, and up here in the Tools, choose Active Directory Properties. Now, this is where we would specify, first of all, what the Active Directory domain is, the actual domain controller that we're using to implement Active Directory in this environment. If you leave nothing there, just leave that blank, then we'll simply go out and use the typical AD lookup, and then in that way we would use whatever we would normally find. That's something I believe it's DHCP is normally what implements that lookup, but if you leave this blank, then we'll simply go out and find whatever Active Directory server is out there. If you do want to specify one explicitly, though, you would put this in here. Now also, as you can see, we have different ways of connecting to that Active Directory machine. In this case, I'm just going to use the account that's associated with this AF server. You can also specify a domain account if you prefer. So if you've done this properly and your network settings are correct, then when it's time to go ahead and subscribe, like for example here, I'm in the Subscriptions tab of a notification. When it's time to subscribe, we can do a search for a contact, and we'll simply search through all of your existing Active Directory users. So when I choose New Search here, let me search for all users. Here's the results. It's the same thing we saw before, but now I can, for example, choose one of these, and here's his delivery endpoint, this email delivery endpoint. I can use this to subscribe along with these other subscribers here. Actually, it looks like he's already subscribed. Let me find another one. If I just drag this over, and that basically subscribes me, or adds him as a new subscriber to that. Now we're going to go over all this in a lot more detail when we actually look at notifications, so don't worry. The point I'm trying to make here, though, is that integration to Active Directory is something you're going to want, and in order to configure that, again, you have to go into Contacts, and within Contacts, go into this Tools, Active Directory Properties. Now, if you want some more information about this, there is a nice section you'll find in your AF manual on configuring Active Directory. So that's the AF User's Guide. You'll find more about the different fields that are configured when you're setting up that Active Directory connection. Now, I mentioned earlier that you could add new endpoints to any of these contacts. So if I go back, let me just demonstrate what I'm talking about here. Here's our Active Directory contacts, or in other words, here are the Active Directory users that we were able to find using our contact search. And the one delivery endpoint that we see so far is this email. But right now, that's the only delivery endpoint that we see here, and we don't see any more for this JD Hogg. Well, if I go into my contacts section, you can actually add new delivery endpoints. So if I were to go out, do this new search and find him within the list of contacts. As you can see, here's his one delivery endpoint, and we'll go over what it means to have a delivery endpoint, what some of these fields are a little later on. But I can just do a new delivery endpoint at this point, and then I would have, for example, an email address that's not part of Active Directory. So that's something that we can do to these contacts once we've found them in Active Directory.